recording each video feed separately. Hey guys, right, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nicholas Ingle Experience, Coffee and Conversations with Champions. We're sitting down with a very special guest today, someone I've known for an extended period of time, someone who was actually at my wedding, which was 10 years ago yesterday. Hey, can
Whoa,
you
is
believe,
that
known you a long
God?
time, man. Hey?
And I knew you much longer before then, I think, as
Yeah,
well. So.
absolutely. Back from we met in insurance, working
Mm-hmm.
for the Hereford Group in Cape Town, and
Correct.
I'm really honored to have Almo on the show because we're going to chat about a lot of stuff. You know,
Mm.
we the topic is fitness, finance, fathers, and freedom, and also we're going to be touching on mental health, how one overcomes serious challenges and trauma and loss, and how
Mm.
do you build a life? Because I mean, you're technically Southern African, and
Mm.
African royalty. Not like seriously on the
Mm.
global stage. I mean, what your family sacrificed for freedom is the ultimate
Mm.
sacrifice. And
Mm.
just to be able to spend time with you over the years and get to know you, where there's no anger, no resentment. You're an amazing guy. So, Elmo, I think if you can tell us a little bit about who you are, a little bit of your background, and
Sure.
Elmo, also, I mean, you are the big Lubowski, but okay. I mean, just check out this
So-
guy's dress sense. He's proper next level. Wear the sunglasses, man. Wear the
Oh
sunglasses.
no, I've got them. I thought it might be rude to wear them like
Huh?
you can't see my
No, come on.
eyes.
Let's go. There we go. You got the
Yeah.
Casey Neistat guy. There we go. Bringing it, my man. Mm,
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, what do I say about myself? I mean, maybe to give people context, not so much about myself, but about my family and where I come from.
mm.
I grew up as the son of a white political activist in Namibia in the 1980s. I think, yeah, I guess it was. I was born 78. So I think as soon as I started becoming aware as a child, my dad was basically yeah, he was a political activist, and a lot of white people didn't like us in
Your
Namibia.
dad was Anton
Anton
Lubowski.
Lubowski, yeah, yeah. So yeah, he joined SWAPO, the Southwest African People's Organization, which would be I guess, the equivalent of the ANC in the 80s. What, not the first white member of the party, as far as I know, but one of the first to very publicly announce it and become very publicly active. And yeah, I think he got to understand some of what was going on through legal matters at the time. Exiles that had disappeared, people needing to have their spouses declared dead because they couldn't find them because they died on the border war or somewhere in exile. And and obviously also being arrested under certain acts that allowed you to be incarcerated without being charged for, I think, up to 180 days. Yeah, so that was me growing up. And I think already a lot of that had a big impact on my life. I saw my dad attend, and lead rallies, because the political parties were banned, including SWAPO and ANC, by the South African government. So a lot of political work actually happened through the unions, because obviously the workforce was um, usually non-white, and unions, they were allowed to have unions, and that's where a lot of political activity happened. So a lot of union rallies and things like that I saw my dad attend, and saw my dad get arrested. I mean, I was at some of the rallies. I mean, I experienced tear gas being shot and rubber bullets being shot at about the age of 8. So yeah, that's how I grew up. And then on top of all of that, my dad was assassinated about 3 days before I turned 11 years old, in 1989. We were in Cape Town at the time, my mother and my sister and I, and he was in Windhoek. And yeah, we found out he was assassinated. No one's ever really been tried or charged for it. There was lots of inquests. But yeah, and from there on, I was told to be the man of the house. I can't remember by who. I don't think it was my mother or my sister. I don't think they expected me to do that, but I think it was placed on me either by my own feeling of responsibility or someone saying something like that. But an 11-year-old isn't really capable of looking after a household. But I did feel the responsibility of that. And yeah, from there, I was lucky enough. My dad did, in fact, and I think we discussed this when we
Mm.
first met each other because we were both selling insurance. Is that my dad did actually have some life insurance, and that allowed for us to, it was managed a little bit by the insurance company, and it allowed for us to at least go to university, which I'm grateful for, which a lot of people, can't do. So I still see myself as very privileged to have been able to go to university. I studied law. That was my first degree. And from there, I went into the finance world. I did a postgrad diploma in financial planning. That's how I got into it. Wasn't with the intention not to get into the insurance sales industry, but as we both know, that's how it kind of works in South Africa. Um, I was looking to gain an extra qualification that would maybe allow me to work in um, say, a legal advisor capacity at an asset manager or an insurance company. But before I knew it, I was selling Liberty Insurance. Yeah, and got into that game. And, a lot of lessons, a lot of interesting lessons in the insurance sales game. But I always questioned, the the fact, the remuneration and the incentive, and how the insurance industry drives incentives, because it's essentially sales. It's I've got a and I had a big problem with it because I think it's sales of products masked as financial planning. And I was actually, I got into this at the same time of studying a postgrad diploma where holistic financial planning and goal setting is talked about, versus my sales manager at Liberty going, how many policies have you sold? What's your PCR count? And all of these things, what's your production? And I just it didn't sit well with me. Plus, I also, people were asking me, why don't you use your legal expertise
Mm.
and things like that? But it led me into, essentially, I was a forced entrepreneur. Um,
Right.
I couldn't get a job. It was difficult. One of the reasons I studied further, the postgrad, was because I couldn't get a work in the legal field in any event. I think I always inherently knew I didn't really want to be a straight out attorney. But I mean, I also needed to have. I was young, and also, um, due to my responsibility, feeling of responsibility for my mother and my sister, I moved easily into the responsibility of my own marriage and kids, and so I had a family to support. And so yeah, I mean, But I was a forced entrepreneur. I would have liked to have worked for someone, get experience, get paid a regular salary. But that wasn't my path, and my path was to learn hard lessons of business and entrepreneurship. And yeah, from the financial service industry taught me a lot. I then moved into more the digital assets, the new world of Bitcoin and things like that. Not from an investment perspective necessarily, but from a regulatory, legal compliance perspective, and that's kind of my expertise.
Mm.
Um, to the point that I'm actually now was lucky enough to be academically published in the book, the South African Financial Planning Handbook, that I studied my postgrad CFP qualification and designation from. And it's a chapter on the regulatory path of digital assets, crypto, and things. And I basically, yeah, I run and am involved in a couple of business which all touch on that. And then I basically I I want to use my all my years of legal experience, of financial advice, financial coaching, but not necessarily to have clients. And that's why I have a podcast which I've recently started, called Business Bucks and Beach Bats. I don't just want it to be boring finance talk and things like that, but I do want people to learn a little bit about
Mm.
lessons around business. So I talk to people that I know, have gone through similar paths as I have, I guess, with business and money. And then beach bats, just to make it a little bit more fun, because as you can see, I try to be a fun guy.
And you are, 100%, dude. So if we go back to just before we came on air, we were touching on mental health. And, I think
Mm,
also one of the things that is neglected or the world's still trying to figure out how to address is men's
mm,
mental health.
right.
Where, you had the male dominated society up until sort of the free love movement of the 60s, and then women
Mm,
empowerment and women in the workplace and the balancing of the sexes. But now, sort
yeah.
of what's happening is what we're seeing is a lot of guys, young guys, are being left behind, and
Right.
they are struggling with their identity. Where do they fit in? We hear
Mm,
topics like toxic masculinity, and
mm,
there's a lot of negative connotations around just being a guy, and
yeah. And
and
especially a white guy.
yeah, and a white guy over 50. Um,
Well, I'm not over 50.
Shut up.
I
Thanks.
wish I was. I wish I
Well,
was. I
yeah.
wish I was
Well,
as
listen.
wise as
Yeah,
you.
yeah. You and I have discussed that with you being
Mm,
petitioning the government, to change your race status given what
my
your
race
family is
status.
given. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah,
Exactly.
obviously quite lightheartedly, but it's an interesting
Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah.
So just with, I mean, fathers are so important, and it's quite apt that you know,
Mm,
today's Father's Day. Your dad
mhm.
was very much larger than life. You know,
Right.
I think not
Mm,
just to you, not just to his community, not just to his country, but to
mm,
the world.
yeah.
For white guys to stand up in that day and age, um,
Mm,
there might have been many that didn't agree with it, with what was
yeah.
happening, with the
Yeah.
treatment of their fellow countrymen, even calling
Mm,
them that. But the truth is that, you know, to have him on that pedestal and then
mm.
taken away, and you use, so this phone should be on silent. That's the Canadians. The
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
They're watching me.
Look at that. It's so epic that they're watching you. They're on the show next. It just, how do you deal with that? Because your
Mm,
dad was assassinated, but a word for me is like your father was murdered. Your
mm,
father was murdered for who he was, what he stood for, and what he believed in.
yeah.
He was taken away. How do you deal with that as a young boy, as a young man, with that kind of loss? You're still a kid. You're very
Mm,
much still a child, and then you have
mm.
this thrust on you.
Nick, in many ways, I'm still dealing with it. There's layers. There's
Yeah.
layers to this. I think at first it was just a matter of, you know, why the hell did I lose my dad? Why me?
Mm.
Why did this happen to me? Um, and then obviously there was a lot of, you know, I it was somewhere in between of like actually in some ways me also being angry with him and saying, you didn't have to do this. You know, you didn't have to. There are people that did some things and they did it in their own way, and that's why I never question anybody in terms of the path that they decided to take. And I know there's a lot of guilt that people have as well around what they may have done or not done. But I was in a situation where I was like, why the hell did you have to go do that? You didn't really have to. And it was in fact he now has a memorial lecture that's put on for him yearly, and Albie Sachs, a constitutional court judge, was actually one of the first guests at this memorial lecture, and he actually put it quite rightly in that it's a lot easier to fight for your own kind, whatever that may mean. I don't want to sort of, cause any kind of division or things like that. But, if your people that you identify with, your own people
Mm.
somehow are being mistreated, it's a lot easier for you to stand up for your people, right?
I mean, and that
Understand?
can be on economic level. It can be on your
Yeah,
community,
a
your town, your
community.
sports
It doesn't have.
team.
Yes, exactly.
That's it.
Your bunch of friends. I mean, just think
Yeah.
about it at a very at a very basic level. You and your friends are out, and somebody comes and messes with your shit. You guys are gonna band together, right? It's
Yep.
easy.
Yeah.
it's much more difficult for somebody that doesn't know much about this from the outside to step in and say, guys, let me try and help if I can to sort this out. And then realize that one side is doing something that isn't really good. And then saying, well, I'm going to stand with these guys, even though my people are on the other side. My dad was essentially an Afrikaans white man.
Mm.
His mother was Afrikaans, his father was German. He went to Paul Roos High School. He went to Stellenbosch University, was in Simonsburg resident. He played first team rugby, and he, basically became one of the first publicly white members of SWAPO, and was called a traitor,
Mm.
you know. And
You
so
mean
for me, it
because
was a matter of
SWAPO was labeled a terrorist organization,
a communist terrorist organization.
communist terrorist
Exactly.
organization? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was the Cold War. So,
Mm.
the communist was the buzzword for everyone. You're fighting the communists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Notwithstanding the fact that obviously a lot of the principles around political parties are socialistic and,
Mm.
have a they do take a lot of the ideology from there, but I think it's because of the extreme. If you think about, yes, capitalism, I'm definitely a capitalist. What I do say to myself, though, or what I do say, is that I have a social conscience.
Mm.
I'm a capitalist, and I do believe in trying to. I'd rather empower. My dad also always said. My dad was definitely not a socialist or a communist by any means. And it was interesting, I would have loved to have seen him actually, in a time like this, after, having gotten, the, the Namibian independence, and then
Mm.
after that, following the South African democracy. Would have loved to have seen him in a
Sure.
time like this, because my dad drove BMWs.
Mm.
He was an advocate. He earned pretty good money. He also managed to get a lot of money, from overseas, for the freedom fight in Namibia.
Mm.
And he always said, no, I'm not. And he wore the best suits. He wore the best ties. We as kids, we could, I mean, I tell people this, not, I'd seen most of Europe by the time I was 8. I mean, I was
Mm.
in Paris recently, and the last time I was in Paris, my mom told me I was probably around 6 years old, which I can't quite remember. I could ski by the time I was 5. My dad always said, I want to bring people up to this level,
Sure.
right? I want to
Yeah.
empower them to bring them up to this level. Where's my hand? There.
Mm. Yeah. You got it.
So he's like, I'm not going to lower my standards. I'm not going to, yes, the wealth, there must be an element of sharing it, but it means sharing in terms of, empowering, in terms of, whatever that may mean. And Namibia was, resource rich. And us as a family, very much believe that a lot of his, a big reason for his assassination was less political, but more economical.
Mm.
In that, I think he stood in the way of a lot of corruption that was about to happen. And the resource. I mean, if you look at Namibia at the moment, 2.5 million people, resource rich. Why do you have 60% people that are poor? There's something wrong. There's
Right.
something massively wrong,
Mm.
right? And in South Africa,
Sure.
it's a lot. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more arguments you can make, with that. But I think in Namibia, it's a plain and simple story. Um, the country was sold out by someone.
Mm. What is your connection to the country? What does it mean to you? Oh,
Namibia,
look at that smile, man. Hey, sure.
Namibia. I mean, it's my home. I was born there. I love going back there. I There's a lot about it that I don't like, because I think it could be better. And that's why I wouldn't easily, and I don't live there, because I think a lot needs to happen in Namibia. I mean, there is good things that are happening, um, but obviously in the city centers. But there's a lot more that could be done in Namibia. It could be a much greater country than what it is. Um, Mainly at the moment, I'll be very honest, I go back for my grandmother.
Mm.
My mother's mother is still alive. And she was, I would say, another mother to me. I mean, I was raised by women. My mother, my mother's sister. My dad has 2 sisters. And then my grandmother, my mother's mother, was very much. I think I spent half my time in Lüderitz, which is another town in Namibia, which I've got a very. I've actually haven't been back to for a while. And between Lüderitz and Windhoek. My grandmother now lives. She moved after my grandfather died. She moved to Swakopmund, so I mainly go and visit her, and then I have tried to also start, becoming economically active, because I believe that if I'm going to make any kind of difference in Namibia at all, it would be through starting a business and starting and empowering myself, and thereafter, empowering other people.
What would your
Yeah.
dream for the country be? What's your I don't want to say use the word perfect, but what would your ideal Namibia be? I mean, just check at this. There's a connection there, huh?
There's so much I could say, and I don't, again, we were actually talking,
Mm,
capitalism versus socialism versus, and all these systems, which are just labels in a lot of ways. I think
mm,
I don't like labels personally, I think, and everyone has an opinion, and that's great. Have your opinion. I have mine. Let's respect each other's. As well,
mm,
um, I just think that I just think there's a lot more that could, I think the capitalism side of things, this trickle down economy type stuff. And I'm not an economist, I'm a lawyer, and I'm an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs definitely aren't economists either. They understand a little bit about business. What I know about business is that I think you could have, I think, and being a lawyer, there's a lot of laws that can change, which can make business a lot more friendly,
mm-hmm.
right? I think that's one of the things that if you look at systems around the world, I think South Africa and Namibia are very, um, very, they're legally stifled in a lot of ways by not making it easier for people to be entrepreneurs, to start businesses. The barrier to entry is too high,
Right.
because they've got too many laws to worry about. And a lot of those laws
Mm,
are often socialistic type of laws, which are supposed to give people the benefit. I do think there's a couple of basics, that I think, even if you're a capitalist society, I feel that things like education shouldn't be a barrier. Everyone should have education. So you cannot have that be a barrier, that children aren't going to school and not getting some kind of education. I think that's quite important. I think healthcare as well. If you want people to live longer, for a country to prosper, you've got to have healthcare. So I do think that there are some basics that need. There's a ground level, or a base level, that needs to have some element of helping people, because I think there's so much um, inequity. It's not
mm,
inequality, because it's inequity. People are not coming in at the same level. There's still a long history, and this is, I think, designed by that anyways. Is there's too many uneducated, poor people in both South Africa and Namibia, and they need to be lifted out somehow, right? So that's a
yeah.
base level
I
for
think
me.
what you touch on with entrepreneurship is so vital, because for you to study and get your law degree and then your postgrad, it's a decade, But if
Mm,
we focusing on developing entrepreneurs,
mm,
empowering kids at school,
mm.
cheap internet connection, cheap mobile
Yeah,
phones,
exactly.
access to online, access
Online,
to
exactly.
cameras and stuff, it, they can grow businesses and just get
That
their
exactly.
stuff
It
out
doesn't
there.
take. And by me saying that I've got three
Mm,
degrees, it's just my path, and I
yeah.
definitely don't believe you need a degree. I work with a lot of people that do not have degrees, and it's
Mm,
exactly that what you say. And we have the tools now. We have the tools to do podcasts. We have the tools to do things like that. So in Namibia, I think I was doing it, helping with a deal, only about like 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, for the first fiber cables to be laid in
mm,
Namibia.
mm,
There should be easy. I mean, when I go to Namibia, I still struggle with internet,
yeah.
right? It's not, I mean, it should be, you should have easy access to the
Mm,
internet, to tools, to technology, because technology can drive entrepreneurship,
yeah.
much more. So basic education, because I think we all need to be able to read and write, obviously. So
Mm,
we're talking high school education. That should be a minimum, sorted out by the government. Tertiary education, I think, we can debate, but but high school education, and from there you need to have the tools and means for people to be able to start
Mm.
businesses.
That,
Yeah.
and spot on, because an entrepreneur who builds a business creates jobs.
Mm,
If you usually have a degree, you go and get a job. So
mm,
creating
exactly.
entrepreneurs creates more employment. I was in Cape
Mm.
Town recently, and at the watershed, the little market there was a
Yes.
gentleman who was making animals out of slip slops. And they found him,
Amazing.
Haviana found him because of his online stuff, and now he uses
Amazing.
all the Havianas. So when you return a pair of Havianas, he gets them. He's
Amazing.
doing
Oh
stuff
my
for
gosh.
Puma. So it's international
Amazing.
exposure. Internet
Mm.
access gives you the opportunity to showcase what you can do, but it also
Yeah.
gives you the opportunity to learn and go on
Mm.
YouTube and learn how to do stuff. I
Do
mean,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. And I want
Mm.
to stick on Namibia for one or two more points and then just chat to you
Sure.
about your experiences. If you were going to say two things, and I know it's quite, but I mean, you are very entrenched in the country. You know the country well. It's your country.
Mm.
You've lived there. You know,
Mm.
if you look at, if you were going to say to people around the world on a tourist point of view, why
Mm.
come to Namibia, firstly? And how's
Mm-hmm.
this for a second question? Uh, If you were to say to businesses, why
Yeah. Why?
invest in Namibia? Why back
Mm.
Namibia? So on those two
Mm.
points, why,
Okay.
that's what I'd like your
Good
input,
questions.
your view on. Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, Namibia is a beautiful country, number one. So it's got. Oh, I
Mm.
mean, it's first of all, you're not gonna, because of there's not a lot of people. You're not gonna see a lot of people. You're gonna see a lot of wildlife. You're gonna see a lot of amazing contrast in terms of. I still haven't covered most of Namibia because, as I said, I often go purely to go visit my grandmother and or for work. So, but I have seen quite a bit of it. So it's a beautiful country. I mean, I know there's a lot of tourists that already go there. Tourism is a huge part of the Namibian economy. Um, and it's the one that I think people can get involved in because all the resources, as I mentioned before, it's going to be difficult for you to get in that because that's already kind of been sold out by whoever was in control of that. So tourism is a big one. So it's a beautiful country. People are extremely friendly. As you know, South Africans also usually very inviting. Hospitality is amazing. Um, yeah, so it's just a really great place to go. It's clean. I mean, they do, as I said, there's a couple of issues, but I mean, in terms of they keep things relatively clean. You can see
Yeah.
dunes, you can see animals, you can see. Yeah, it's just a really if you really need a break in nature, I think that's
Mm.
definitely Namibia for. Plus, obviously, a little bit of the normal amenities. They have got some great places to stay, great lodges, also hotels in the cities and the smaller towns. So really great country to go to. Very friendly people, amazing country to live. In terms of companies going there, um, I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially I've tried to get a lot of financial services companies to think about starting businesses there because the barrier to entry from a regulatory point of view is still pretty low. Meaning, unfortunately, what that often does, it invites bad elements as well, such as scams, especially in the financial world. But I think if properly done, it's a great place to think about starting a financial services company of some sort. Just in terms of being based there, it's a great place to live. So and I think there's a lot of so the barrier to entry in terms of financial services is one I've experienced. So I'm only talking mostly from personal experience here. Um, I think people often say South Africa is a gateway to the rest of Africa. I think the same applies to Namibia. So if you are not, don't look at the Namibian market as only being 2.5 million people or whatever it may be. Because you can, we've also got the common monetary area in South Africa with Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, meaning money movement is quite easy. So you could also have a business based in Namibia doing business with the common monetary area because money movement is quite easy because as people may know, like getting your money out of South Africa or Southern African states is quite difficult with exchange controls, which was an apartheid legacy, unfortunately, more than anything else. But I think everyone has realized the gains that they can get from that, and money should actually be moving a lot more freely between um, anyone. Why are you not allowed to move your own money wherever you want it to be? So exchange controls are something I don't agree with whatsoever. It's a barrier to doing business. But at least in the Southern African area, as I said, you can base yourself in Namibia and be doing business with South African clients and Zimbabwean clients and Botswanan clients. Botswana is also one of those
Mm.
great success stories, I think, as well. Also, very few people similar to Namibia, and has also been much more, I think, active in inviting um, investment and making it a lot easier for businesses to operate there. So maybe a couple of tweaks, and you could easily get a lot of businesses to base themselves there.
So, I mean, you could have it competing with Mauritius as a financial services hub.
Yes, and even a tax haven. I think there's already a couple of
Mm.
tax advantages different to South Africa. Namibia doesn't have capital gains tax. It doesn't have estate duty. Um, hopefully by mentioning this kind of thing, it doesn't, happen, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of, yeah, but, you could even just say, let's just do it. Let's just make it a tax-friendly
Mm.
place to do business from in Africa, because I think this tax thing is also something that governments hold on to so much. But if you're opening up business, more so, and not have all these tax barriers, the money flow is going to be there. There's going to be enough. It's
Yeah.
it's a scarce mindset. This, to have all these unnecessary tax laws.
Right.
You know.
And particularly with a country, as you were saying, that is so resource rich.
Mm,
If that could work in a different way, but no, that's not something to chat about now.
mm,
Um, Question: what is your
mm.
favorite restaurant in Windhoek? I need to be careful because I'm sure you're going to say your grandmother's and
Yeah, my grandmother's
your
my
grand's
favorite.
cooking. Yeah,
Unfortunately, she doesn't. Unfortunately, she doesn't. She isn't able to make me food. But yeah, my favorite food in
yeah.
Namibia was always my grandmother's for sure,
That's
100%.
awesome. Okay.
Bratwurst and
Yeah.
sauerkraut.
Oh, yeah.
In
So if you're going to give us
Windhoek,
a couple of towns, Luderus, Windhoek, and where should people
well,
go for a bite?
I would. I mean, I when I go to Swakopmund to visit my grandmother, that's usually where we actually go out and eat quite a lot, because she likes to have some treats when I'm there. Um, so yeah, you got the in Swakopmund, you got the Brauhaus, definitely, and you've got. I mean, we often even go to the what they call the Strand
Mm,
Hotel, but there's a couple of restaurants on it's like the promenade. It's a smaller
mm,
promenade.
mm.
Very nice. The hotel's also quite nice. Just trying to think where else we go. I can't necessarily think of all the names, but
Okay.
there's a there's a couple of nice places around. I mean, it- Namibia, being a German colony, is obviously it's quite it's got a lot of German heritage. So you're
Mm.
definitely going to find some interesting German restaurants around as well, that serving your traditional German stuff. So that's usually quite nice to have, which is obviously second best to my grandmother's. But
Yes.
we always will go together and have that food she used to make, but at a restaurant.
Okay. Fair. 100%.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, is German still spoken quite freely there? I mean, is it a common language? I'm asking from the point of tourism, like German tourism. I mean,
Yeah, I think
Cape Town. There's a lot of tourism from
yeah.
Europe and primarily Germany. But why should German tourists consider Namibia?
No, I think German tourists definitely. I think there's a lot of good relationships between the two countries. I mean, good
Mm.
and bad. I think they're also suing the German government for their colonialist crimes as well. But other than that, um, yeah, definitely. I mean, Lufthansa, I think, is one of the only airlines that has a direct flight. So definitely, any German people that haven't been to Namibia definitely will enjoy it.
Right.
Um, I think yeah, a lot of people can speak German there. I mean,
Mm.
I've, yeah. Let me not go into too much detail there, but
Right.
in any event, because at the end of the day, from a personal perspective, the Germans in my time when I was in school were not very friendly to
Yeah.
my family. So it was one of those. I mean, obviously, I there's with heritage, there's always that dichotomy. I definitely have a German heritage, but I think a lot of my experience, and I'm sure that's obviously changed. But I started at the DHPS in Windhoek, the Deutsche Hohe Privatschule, and I was bullied at school, and my dad's car was peppered with paint one parent evening, so we left. We got taken out of this. I got taken out of the school, and that's where my interesting school career started of about 8, 9 different schools in 12 years, various reasons. But the first is the unhappiness of the German community in Namibia
Mhm.
against what my dad was actually doing. Yeah, so
I
that's
mean,
my
what
sort
what
of
wa-
story.
what was that like growing up in school? And I mean, you told me you were called some pretty horrendous names. We need to be careful here because this
Mm,
podcast is set up as
yeah,
non-explicit.
not
So
explicit. Yeah, yeah. I've been
non-explicit.
watching myself.
Thank
My
you.
one will be a
Okay.
little bit different.
Yeah, that's cool. But it's like
Yeah.
just from the point of view as like your dad sacrificed a lot, but what he
Mm,
chose, the path he chose, you also sacrificed for, and possibly unintentionally, right?
mm,
It was a sacrifice by default, and
right.
that can be quite a challenging thing where you say, like, why are you choosing this path over
Mm.
us, over our comfort? Can't we just
Oh, yeah,
fit in?
exactly.
What was that like?
That's the Yeah, I mean, that as I was explaining a lot earlier when I was giving you some, and how that felt. I mean, on the one hand, that it was like that, I mean, he could have chosen not to do that. So it was very hard. And a lot of the time, the immediate place of trauma that one goes to is the fact that my dad was assassinated. But the trauma started way before then, in the way we were treated as a family, as the
Mm.
way I was treated at school, the way what I experienced, many different stories, because then I went to St. George's Diocesan School, which was
Can
already
can
a
we
multiracial.
touch on
Yeah.
that a little bit? Because I think we live in a world today where there's such a focus on anti-bullying and everyone
Mm,
being safe and everyone being protected. What
mm,
was that like? I mean, and if you could give us some examples that won't mean I'm going
mm.
to have to bleep stuff out. No,
Yeah, no. No,
but
I
people
mean,
need
it
to
was,
understand the severity of that
yeah.
trauma.
So I mean, it started, as I said, at the German school in the DHPS in Windhoek, where the kids were. I mean, I got glasses, I think, when I was grade 2, so B at the time, it was still called,
Mm,
and I think they were broken about a week or two after I'd gotten my first pair of glasses, which are obviously not cheap. So, bullied at the German school. Then went to St. George's Diocesan School, was multiracial, and became, friends with a lot of different people. And actually, in fact, one of my first friends was Iradius Lazarus. We're still friends at this point in time. And, I spent a lot of time with him and his cousins. And when we went to the pool, the Windhoek public pool, we were again ridiculed by white
mm,
people there, in terms of, because there was in Namibia, it wasn't as strict as some of the places in South Africa, but you definitely got a lot of, you definitely weren't greeted friendly if you were a non-white person, if you were a white person spending time with non-white people. So I experienced a lot of that, where we were asked to leave places because, my mother would take us to a place. We also went to, like, Kos Barman, only Namibians would know, but it's like a hot springs place where there
mm,
was also a number of Iradius would probably, if he was ever on a podcast with me, would give you all the stories, because I think I tried to block them out a little bit more. He remembers them a lot better. But yeah, it was continuous. It was continuously experiencing, um, because because Iradius was now friends with the white person that was going to places where often, I was used to going as a white person. We came up against this quite a lot, because we were friends, and he was spending time at my house, and also his cousins Shanuni and his other cousins, Nangado Nangula, who were mixed race, in fact, He was staying in their house, and their father was James Kaluma, who was the Archbishop of Namibia of the Methodist Church, if I'm saying under correction, but the Desmond Tutu of Namibia, Bishop James Kaluma,
Mm.
and this was Iradius was a nephew of his and staying in his house. Yeah, so that was yeah, we continuously experienced that. A lot of that, and as I said, until essentially and leading up to my dad's assassination.
Did growing up, did you feel that you belonged to any community, or did you feel almost an outsider in both?
I think yeah, you're right. I felt an outsider in both, but I would say that what it did though is it allows me to gravitate to any person as an individual. I don't necessarily want anything else to be a barrier. So I don't necessarily need that sense of belonging. I think that sense of belonging for me comes from one of my important values, which is relationships. And if I connect with someone on a certain level, then that's who I feel I belong to. I don't need to belong to any specific group of people or things like that. I think it's allowed me not. It's actually also caused me to, I guess, be very wary of groups, such as religious groups, such as any organized sort of too if something is too organized of a group and it's too much of an identity that they try and create, I'm immediately wary of it. So I don't, I gravitate toward individuals rather than groups in any event. And I think maybe that's one of the things I got instead of belonging with a group of people in my life.
It was choosing the individual rather than the group,
Yeah,
and finding that.
exactly.
How did you cope? How did you survive? If we talk to kids now or young adults that are having a tough time, that are feeling that they don't belong,
Mm,
touching on what you've just shared. So,
mm,
you know, if having your dad
mm,
assassinated and taken away
mm,
from you, but leading up to that, not really feeling that you belong
mm.
to the community, and like, I mean, it was a huge sacrifice, and I don't think people today, the younger generation, perhaps can't relate so well
I
to
think so.
that
Yeah.
level of
Mm,
sacrifice that was made
mm,
for where the countries are, both countries are
mm.
today. How did you cope? How did you survive? What got you through? What got you to be the awesome individual that you are today?
Thank you.
Yeah, dude.
Sometimes I don't think I'm that awesome, but
But you know what? You keep fighting, dude.
mm, yeah, I
That's
do.
it. So,
Um,
what could you
I
share?
well, what I definitely I think it's been a journey. I don't after my dad died, I think I stuck my head down and I got on with life. I tried to do the best I could in school, and I then had the opportunity to study, and I was basically just doing the normal life thing. And I kind of actually wanted to stay a little bit under the radar, if I can call it that. I definitely didn't want to go
Mm.
into. So I think I definitely started losing myself a little bit as an individual. Um,
But I think just on that point, I mean, to stay under the radar, to stay safe,
that's also true. No, my
you know?
and my mom. We asked a lot of time why she left in Namibia, because we ended up in Pretoria of all places, which
Mm.
was also a good and bad experience in many ways. But um, yeah, I she did have there were safety issues in the first couple of years for sure. But in terms of in yeah, I just thought that I'd seen this big figure of my dad do all these things while seeing him do all of this while growing up, and then basically him getting totally annihilated, taken out. You know, if you experience that as a child, you go like, "There's no way I'm standing up for anything because you're just going to get shut down." You know, this is the power that people may have.
Mm.
Um, so I think I was a very introverted, shy, low self esteem, um, individual, I think, throughout school, a little bit through varsity. I started finding myself a little bit, I think, towards the end of varsity. Um, my mom, one of she once gave me a gift of getting a personal trainer for about 3 months during varsity, and I think that started talking about it. One of the things we want to talk about is definitely fitness. That started my journey with exercise, fitness, and it's been a journey. It's been an up and down journey in many ways, which you've been part of. And I think so. I think the two things that stick out in my mind, or maybe three. The one is my mom getting me a personal trainer for I think 3 to 4 months, which got me on a really good journey with regards to that. And then the second one that sticks out in my mind is after your you leaving the insurance industry and starting your fitness empire, I would say, is you said
Mm.
come and train with me,
Mm.
and that was definitely, and your approach to that, it was definitely in terms of, it wasn't about weight loss or not weight loss or whatever. It was about mental toughness. It was about overcoming that voice in your head. I remember that so well. Because that's all it is. You can achieve
Yeah.
anything from a fitness level and from a business level and from a money level. It's your mind that's in the way, and that is what Emmett and Nick Ingle taught me.
Mm.
A broken individual himself,
Yeah.
in many ways, taught me that. And yeah, that. Sorry,
You need to take a moment. This is why I
I'm
switch.
good. I'm good.
This is
No,
why I
no, it's
switch
good. It's good.
cameras on to me.
No.
Sorry, man. Yeah.
And then I think the third thing is me I think people is that great little video that Snoop Dogg does and Snoop Dogg's one of the first CDs I only knew hip hop because of, let's talk about my back,
Yeah.
let's say it was my background that
Dude,
I only
I've
grew up
seen you
with
at
hip hop.
Cape Town Stadium. You only know hip hop. That
I,
I
I
love
mean,
it, man.
but it creates a love for other music because
Yeah.
it samples all other music. So
But
I love all kinds of
it
music.
also shares personal and community pain in a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
unique and
And
real way.
yeah.
Um,
So talking about that is Snoop Dogg does this thing. I think I don't know where it was exactly, but he's like, I'd like to thank me for all the things I've done, and I'd like to
yeah.
thank me. It is you, because at the end of the day, it's and that's, I think, what Emmett also taught. It
Mm.
and everyone that's trying to give some assistance to people out there, it's your own strength that you need to build.
Yeah.
Yes, there's people along the way that help you, and that's awesome. And I want to be one of those individuals. You want to be one of those individuals for other people that give that little bit of a push, that might have that little bit of an influence. But at the end of the day, it comes down to you. It comes down to the choices you make, and you've got to actually decide what you want to do. And from there, you can achieve anything. And I think with regards to fitness, it's definitely, I mean, it's a crucial part. It's a crucial part of mental health and fitness is mental fitness, because
Yeah.
the mental fitness you get through the pain you have to go through. And sometimes I don't do it. Sometimes I haven't exercised for a year, but the minute I get back to it, and it's one of the reasons I actually also created which hasn't really ever, I've never really launched it properly. I feel like it's kind of, for me, it's my own brand, but I am thinking of launching it. I started a range of exercise gear for big and tall guys, because especially because I was overweight and have been overweight in different phases in my life. But I've always found exercise to, I love it, and I love, especially like weight training and lifting. Like I don't, and that's a love I also kind of was encouraged by you. And like I don't want to have a six pack. I really do not want
Yeah.
to have a six pack. I want to be strong as,
Exactly.
I just want to be strong. Like, because I want to be, I want, it's not to prove anything. It's just is to know, like, if I can lift this, I can do other things as well.
If I can
Um,
lift this, I can carry myself.
yeah. Yeah,
You
I
know?
just want, I want to be strong
Yeah.
just for others, as well. I
Okay.
don't,
Yeah.
and I mean, I remember visiting my uncle. Not so. It was I took my kids to Australia for the first time. My uncle Julian Pulvermacher, who's been like a father to me as well. Um, so shout out to him on Father's Day. But
Hold on
you
a
know,
second. And
yeah. So I remember I lifted something like we went for some weekend away, and I lifted something, and he was like,
mm,
"Yo, wow, Almo, I didn't realize you're that strong." And I'm
yeah,
like, "That's my game, man. I'm just
yeah,
strong. I'm just
that's
strong."
it. But that's the beautiful thing because the physical
Mm,
strength can teach us we have the mental strength. So I
mm,
think just to go back for those listening that are struggling with their mental health and their feeling of belonging, you're saying exercise is a great way to
mm,
to to find your place, training. And if you
mm,
want to be, you've got to fight for the strength you want. If you want
mm.
to be strong, if you want to be able to
Yeah,
cope,
work.
if you want to be able to survive, you got to do the work. It's not
Mm,
automatic. It doesn't come
no, no.
automatically. You've got to put in the effort and put in the time. So,
But also, Nick, I think the other important thing is when we talk about this and work and whatever, it does sometimes bring up something in people.
mm,
Don't beat yourself up about the past of you not exercising as well. Don't go and go, I haven't exercised for a year.
mm,
I haven't done this. You can start today again. Forget about that you didn't train for the last 6 months and that you ate too much and that you're not feeling comfortable. Just
yeah.
start, and don't
Well,
beat yourself up about
yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah.
it. And the thing is, what does eating too much mean anyway? You know,
Damn, I love food. I mean, that's another thing. It's like, always remember all your posts. Like, "Oh, I'm having this lovely cheesecake now." It's like, eat what you want, man. It's good,
yeah.
but
Don't
feel good
punish
as
yourself.
well.
Yeah.
Don't
Don't,
punish yourself.
don't
Yeah.
punish yourself for the food. Absolutely.
Mm.
Dude, what's the future holding for Elmo? What are your plans going forward? Or what can you talk about? Because I know you're
What
always
can I talk
involved
about? Yeah,
with so many things, from
so many
clothing
things.
brands to,
Clothing brands
you
to
know, yeah, that's
or
it,
crypto regulatory stuff.
yeah. And then maybe we could chat about you be your father. You're a dad,
Yeah. No,
and hey,
it's been an awesome journey. I mean, kids are basically out of the house almost.
yeah,
My daughter's finished. I mean, and that's been one of the things I've really, I think a lot of my life is my life's changing. I wouldn't say my
mm,
life's changing because I feel I dedicated my life to my kids and my family for the last 18 years or so because my daughter's turned 18 last year.
sure, hey,
And yeah, and I've done everything for them. I haven't. One of the other reasons I've started so many businesses and done so many things is because I just had to keep things going. I wanted
yeah,
to make sure that they, especially, I wanted to make sure that they get everything that some of the things I didn't have, that I maybe missed out on. Um, in
but
terms of my son,
yeah,
for instance, and as I said, my dad went to Polrus, top school, and went to Stellenbosch University, Simonsburg. I've also wanted to provide that opportunity to my son.
mm,
I was at 8 different schools, and yes, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a different thing, and I, I and it might not be it might not be that is the right thing either. But I felt it's something I missed out on to not have gone to a really good school that gives you the right contacts in business because
mm,
you see it in a lot of instances like you go to
absolutely.
you go to the right school, you get the right opportunities, which is not necessarily right or wrong. I'm not. It's just I wanted to provide that for them. I didn't want to have to say no if my kids say, "Look, I want to go to this school. I want to study here,
Mm,
or I want to have." Obviously, you find the balance. I don't want to spoil my kids, but
yeah.
I've tried to give them what I thought I didn't necessarily have, and I've worked very, very hard to provide that. And in
And
the
I think just
meantime,
yeah. Oh, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. Yeah. On
that's fine.
that point, I mean, what lessons? And it's a difficult question to ask, and you don't have to answer it at all. Right? what lessons did you learn from your childhood
Mm.
that you put into being the father that you wanted to be?
Well, the thing is, it's I can't blame my dad for getting killed. I mean,
Mm,
as I said, I kind of tried to, or you know, in some ways, I was angry that he maybe did get himself killed,
mm.
but you know, for a good thing, for a good cause. So you know, I
I mean,
mean,
it was something that I'm sure he was very aware of.
and he did,
Right?
and he in fact said he doesn't want to have to look in our faces one day and say he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So he did that as because he loved us and he loved people, and he wanted to see better for other people.
Mm,
And obviously, he didn't necessarily think he was, you know, that people were that evil and callous and cowardly to just kill someone and assassinate them helplessly. Um, but you know, I think so. So I didn't have a dad, but it wasn't his fault. But I wanted
mm,
to. The lesson was that I wanted to be there. The other lesson, I guess, is from my mom because my mom obviously raised us, and my mom gave us a lot of freedom. She allowed us to experience life, and I think that was the one thing that was the one lesson I brought into with my kids. You obviously have to have some level of discipline and teaching and things that you need to tell your kids, but I try to not be a helicopter parent and not you know not allow them to experience life, and I think it's made them awesome individuals. um, you know, they've been able, I've tried to give them choice in life. I've tried to make them think about their decisions. I mean, with my son, it's again immediate example that comes up. You know, I wanted to send him to Sachs, where he is now, and he wanted to go with his friends to another high school where they were going. And in the end, you know, it was the right decision. You know, certain things I did push a little bit with, but in terms of other things, you know, I I I have pushed where I can because that is what I didn't have. I didn't have my mom was maybe too sometimes a little bit too easy on us in terms of when you know, if I wanted to start a sport, I started. Then if I didn't feel like it, you know, then sometimes you need to have a little bit of encouragement and say, but why, or investigate why that person is not doing something. But I, in any event, found my love for basketball because of that. You know, didn't play rugby, the normal sports, because of the schools I was in. I didn't play cricket. I was a swimmer, and I eventually found basketball. And now, uh, my son's found basketball, and basketball seems to be getting really big in South Africa again. And you know, the scene is growing, and so it was a good thing. You know that,
How
and
tall
I
is
loved the
he?
game. He's taller than me.
Yeah.
We haven't
He's
measured him. I'm 188, and he's definitely he's definitely 191, 192 already.
okay. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome kid. I mean, I remember him from the gym.
Do
So
you know? Well, you know what he remembers, Nick, is
yeah,
he remembers that boxing fight I had, which we
yeah, the
don't have
white
any pictures
tiger.
of. And you know that he was a little
You
bit
broke you
traumatized by that.
uh, you you broke the guy's shoulder. I remember that. It was terrible. Hey.
He dislocated it trying to hit
Yeah,
me
yeah, no,
and
no,
risked
we know
it.
that.
No,
Yeah, sure, sure. Hold on.
yeah, but I don't want to. I don't want to. I'm not that. Yeah, I don't want to be seen as someone who
Hey,
breaks people's shoulders. But yeah, it
no,
was a
but
good fight though. It
it
was a
was a
good fight.
great fight.
But
But you know,
I
on,
think
on
I
that
want to have
point, it
another
was
one.
yeah,
Yeah,
100%. We'll if you know,
yeah. And I
on
want
that
you to
point,
train me. I want you
yeah,
to train me.
with pleasure. It was so much fun because it was two guys who started chirping in the gym, and
Yeah,
then it lit well, let's fight, and like,
yeah,
okay, cool. There was
yeah.
no animosity, there was no bad blood.
No,
There was a
yeah,
huge audience of people that arrived to watch,
yeah.
and it was
In the gym.
fantastic. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, I think he was beating you a little bit on the cardio side, and that's when you
yeah.
broke his arm, his shoulder. But
But
no,
but that was the thing.
no
He
kidding. Yeah,
underestimated my cardio fitness.
he properly underestimated, and you were
He
fit.
thought, yeah, it was
Uh,
fourth round.
Yep.
Fourth
No,
round.
dude,
I maintained.
you were super fit. It was
Yeah.
fantastic. So that was
And
yeah.
the chirp was because I was training at the gym and I was getting into
Mm.
my fitness and I was doing. Remember when we did clap push-ups?
Yep.
We used to do, yeah.
Yep.
And I think you took a really great photo of me.
Yeah.
and I posted it, and he started chirping on this thing, and that he
Yeah.
actually he because he secretly started training for boxing before the match because he was a little bit worried. Obviously,
Mm,
the weight class wasn't the same. He thought he had me on fitness. He got into boxing training because of that.
yeah.
He still trains boxing.
Sure.
He would.
One
I
arm.
wouldn't fight him now. I wouldn't fight him now. Yeah,
One arm.
yeah.
You know, it'd
He's
be
a
lovely to.
one-arm fighter
Yeah,
now.
we definitely need a lunch with the three of you guys. With the three
Yeah,
of us. That's
yeah.
fantastic. All right. So, dude, like for your
Mm,
podcast, which we're going to step off this one now and jump
yeah,
onto yours. What is your view with that? What is your vision? What are you trying to give people with your show? Talk a little bit
yeah.
about that, and
Yeah, I think that's about the
your
only thing that
what do you want to
I
do
do
with the
want to.
future? Yeah, the future
Yeah,
Elmo.
so
Mm,
yeah, so I think that's one of the things. I think the podcast I started was to combine all these skills that I've had. I don't necessarily want to be giving people financial advice anymore
mm,
on an individual level. I don't want to necessarily do any business coaching. Um, but what I want to do on the podcast is I want to try and, with the guests I have and my own, is impart some knowledge around business, finances, money,
mm.
and also some hobbies and fitness, because I think fitness is part of the beach bats part. It's fitness can be a very fun thing, and obviously sports and all of that. So that's where the beach bats comes in. The reason it's beach bats because beach bat isn't necessarily a competitive sport, but it's more fun, but it also
Are
gives
you
you a lot of
joking?
fitness.
They've stripped it down and called it paddle now and stuck
Yeah,
people
that's
in
the one.
steel cages. It's insane. I was at the waterfront and saw this. The guy, they're hardcore. What are you, bang,
Yeah,
bang, bang. It's
yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's exactly. It's basically it's not only a mix of tennis and squash. It's
Yeah,
actually
it's
it's
beach
beach
bats.
bats as well.
I
Yeah.
mean, when I think
Um,
of beach bats, I think of two fat guys on Clifton Beach with gold chains and speedos having a smoke between, back in the 70s and 80s.
yeah,
Between,
yeah,
that's with
yeah.
an old
It's
wooden
been
bat,
them.
and
Yeah,
then
which is
making
what
the
I'm
kid,
more thinking. It's like they're still getting some exercise in,
yeah.
but
But they
they
make their
still have,
kids run for the ball when they've knocked the ball too far away.
yeah, instead of doing it themselves. Yeah.
Exactly,
So I think
exactly.
the podcast is that for me. It's using all of this legal, financial, business knowledge that I've attained over the years to impart it on that platform, rather than any individual businesses that I'm necessarily involved in. But yeah,
Okay, 100%.
that's what I want to achieve.
Dude,
Yeah.
that's epic. Elmo, my man,
Yeah.
thank you for coming on. And
Cool,
where do
man.
people find you? So, what's the podcast called? How do people
Look,
get you on social? If they
okay.
want to message you or
So
hook you up,
it's actually quite easy. I
hit you
mean,
up,
so
not hook you up. Hit you up.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
old.
yeah.
I'm trying
And
to.
I don't mind getting a hit, because one thing that Nick Engel taught me is learn to take the punch.
Exactly. That's it. That's how
Um,
fights are won. Yeah.
and then yeah, so I mean, basically the easiest is to start looking at my socials, which is at Almo Lubowski on everything. So it's ALMOLUBOWSKI
So,
at Almo
yeah.
Lubowski.
So, I'll be
Just
pointing
put
that
the
way.
at sign in front on all
Yeah.
socials: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
All right.
You should be able to find me. And then on my website's also just almolubowski.com. My podcast is called Business Bucks and Beach Bats, but you
There you
should
go.
also
Check that
find
out,
that
brother.
too.
Look, how's there we
Yeah,
go. Hey.
just and in
Mm.
fact, just Google me.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
All right, 100%.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, my brother,
cool,
thank you so much
cool,
for your
man.
time, dude.
Yeah, no, thanks for
Uh,
bringing me on. It's great, awesome.
Pleasure. So now you're going to
So,
send me your link and
yeah,
we'll jump into your podcast. How cool is
I'm gonna
this?
I'm gonna probably take the tie off for that one, so it'll be
Okay,
different. But you keep
sweet.
yours
No
on.
problem. One question the ladies watching the show want to know. You're wearing
Yeah.
a jacket, you're wearing a tie. Are you
Mm.
wearing
And I'll
pants?
I'll leave that up to your imagination.
There we go. This is leading up to the craziness, which is going to be your show now. Okay. Which, hold on. We're just going to end the broadcast and
Yeah,
then I'll chat to
cool.
you.